Good evening and welcome to this edition of Behind the Badge. I'm Chief Steve Mims with the Melbourne Police Department, and with me this evening is Barb Bergin, Executive Director for Crimeline. We're going to be talking about Crimeline and reporting criminal activity and how you can help out your community in that regard just as soon as we return. Thank you for joining us.
Crimeline, 1-800-423-TIPS. We pay cash for crooks. No names, no faces, no hassles. Call us day or night. You're eligible for up to a $1,000 reward if we use your tip to make an arrest. Crimes happen every day in our community. You know they are wrong, but do you care enough to do something about it? Call the Anonymous Tips Hotline today, 1-800-423-TIPS.
The Melbourne Police Department is adaptable and responsive to the community's needs, with numerous divisions and specialty units designed to promote an atmosphere of security for the citizens they serve. Officers are deployed 24 hours a day throughout the city, possessing advanced knowledge of their geographic patrol zones. Officers focus on providing protection to the citizens of Melbourne by preventing the occurrence of street crimes through visible preventive patrol and by responding rapidly to all requests for emergency police service. The department continually strives to maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of its personnel through the use of specialty units. Melbourne's Canine Unit performs duties as varied as the tracking of criminals, building searches, field searches, criminal apprehension, crowd control, and the detection of drugs and explosives.
Good evening and welcome back. I'm Steve Mims, Police Chief for the City of Melbourne. With me this evening is Barb Bergin. She's the Executive Director for Crimeline. And Barb is going to tell us a little bit about the history of Crimeline and how we got to where we are today.
Chief, thank you very much for the opportunity to tell the community here in Melbourne what we do. Central Florida Crimeline has been around for 35 years. We're actually one of the oldest Crime Stopper programs in the world, if you will. We started when Orlando Police Department went to visit Albuquerque Police Department, who had a case, offered an anonymous tip line, and said, we'll give you cash if you can help us solve it. And then started Crime Stoppers in the world. Crimeline, as we're known here, covers 6 counties. We are in Brevard, Seminole, Sumter, Orange, Osceola, and Lake, and that encompasses about 2.7 million people living in our service area right now. We're actually recognized as one of the largest Crime Stopper programs in North America. We're taking over 11,000 tips a year right now, and we're solving over 1,100 cases every 12 months. And I want to explain, I think it's real important that the community knows exactly what this process is, because you always see Crimeline after a news story. It says, call Crimeline if you want to remain anonymous. But how does that work? What is anonymity? How are you anonymous in this day and age? If you call our phone number at 1-800-423-TIPS, you are going to be 100% anonymous. We don't trap, trace, record, or have any caller ID. In no way, shape, or form are we going to ask you who you are. If you even said to us who you were, we would never put that inside your tip. That is the same if you give us a tip at crimeline.org or if you give us a text tip. You will never be identified through the phone you're using or the computer you're using. When you give us a tip, and that's 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year, we take your tip, we process it, and then we bring it back into our office. And we have to identify, is it Melbourne Police Department, does it belong to Palm Bay Police Department, and the tip is then sent off to the local law enforcement agency for investigation. And at the end of that investigation, if that tip leads to a solved felony case, whether it be felony drugs, felony stolen property, felony arrests, we will then take it to our board of directors, and they will determine reward amounts. And in all felony cases, it's up to $1,000. And I say up to because we have it on a scale, if you will. You know, if you give us a tip about a person who's wanted for a warrant for possession of cocaine, obviously that tip's important and we want him to be caught. But if you give me a tip that's going to help us solve an armed bank robbery, that's going to get a little more money. So we always say up to. Every case is gauged on an individual base-by-base cases. In homicides, we pay up to $5,000. So if you know anything about any unsolved homicide, it doesn't have to be in Melbourne, it can be anywhere. Any homicide, it's up to $5,000. And again, that's on a case-by-case, and it's on a scale, if you will. So the big question then becomes, if you're anonymous, how do we pay you, right? I mean, I don't know who you are. How do we give you some money?
How do we work that out?
Well, the way we work that out is we ask all the tipsters to always stay in touch with us. You're going to be given a tip ID number. And it's on you, as the tipster, to be calling us back during business hours to get an update on your tip. So if I give a tip to the Melbourne Police Department, and it's a drug tip, and that tip helps you and your officers go to a house, and it shuts down a drug house, and people go to jail, and we get drugs and things, your officers are responsible for coming back to us and saying, this was a good tip, it helped us shut this down, and here's the results. The board votes on it, and then we tell the tipster, we let them go to a bank, and that we have a bank here in Brevard County to make it easy on them, and they go in and they literally get cash without showing ID, without signing anything. They simply go to the teller and they get cash and they walk out the door.
And how does the teller know who they are?
We have a method in place, if you will. It's through the numbers and things like that.
Confidential.
And
clearly it's confidential. We don't want people knowing how that works. But suffice it to say, that's to protect the anonymity, if you will, of the person walking in to receive the cash.
Absolutely. And
that's why we're also not telling what bank it is.
No, exactly that.
You won't know what bank it is unless you turn in a tip and get a reward.
Yeah, very, very true. So again, that's back into protecting everybody.
Exactly.
We don't even tell law enforcement. I can tell you right now that the chief of Melbourne doesn't know which bank we use in Brevard County.
I absolutely do not.
So if you give a successful tip, then you're going to be eligible for a reward. I always think it's interesting, and I tell people this, that this is one of those things you don't have to claim on your taxes either. So if you become one of our regular tipsters, it is not something you have to report on your income tax, which is kind of an interesting side note, if you will. When it comes to funding, I think it's also important that people know how we get our money.
Get your funding. Exactly.
We do get some donations from private sources, whether it be businesses. Law enforcement will give us donations from forfeiture funds. But our primary funding comes from what's called the Crime Stoppers Trust Fund. And that is a state statute that says every time a person goes to court and they're convicted of a crime, felony, misdemeanor, traffic, other crimes in the court system, judges are required by law to assess court fines, and the Crime Stopper Trust Fund is one of them. It's a $20 fine. So $20 is collected, it goes through the system, the clerk of the court takes some money from that, it goes to Tallahassee, some of it goes to general revenue, and then ultimately it comes back to us through the Attorney General's office, who are the administrators of our grant. That money is always flowing and coming through the state system, and it's on a year-by-year basis for the grant money.
Excellent. Well, when we come back, we're going to talk some more about Crimeline and how to get a hold of them and how that program works, and some success stories and statistics. If you'll bear with me, I'll get that out and we'll be right back. Thank you for joining us.
This is the Melbourne Police Department, one of Florida's premier and most technologically advanced police agencies. Specialists in crime prevention, detection, and investigation. The Melbourne Police Department's Special Weapons and Tactics Team, more commonly referred to as SWAT, are highly motivated officers trained in the use of tactical weaponry who work closely with the Crisis Negotiations Team to resolve life-threatening situations. The Melbourne Police Department's Marine Patrol Unit and Dive Team provide much-needed services to the city's congested waterways and play an integral part in the department's commitment to community service. This woman has a disease. She shows no signs of being ill. She doesn't smoke, doesn't drink, yet she developed this illness. The people she's with don't notice her sickness. The people she spends less time with do. Her illness is getting worse. She'll bring her disease home, if she has a home to return to. She is a compulsive gambler. If you or someone you know has a gambling problem, call the Florida Council on Compulsive Gambling helpline, 888-ADMIT-IT.
Thanks for coming back. I'm Steve Mims with the Melbourne Police Department. This is Behind the Badge, and with me this evening is Barb Bergin from Crimeline. We've been talking about Crimeline and how successful it's been and what a use it is for the community. There are a lot of other things that Crimeline's doing out in the community to make it safer for us, and we're going to talk for a few minutes about some of the other programs that Crimeline's got going on. Involving bullying and Operation Speak Out. And then before we leave this evening, we're going to talk to you about some success stories that Crimeline's had. But before we get into that, Barbara, you wanted to talk about Speak Out.
Sure. I think in this day and age, Speak Out's extremely important. If you will, Speak Out is sort of our campus program. It is just a different name for the exact same program on the school campuses, and for kids to utilize. We talk about if you know information and you're a student about weapons coming on campus, drugs being on campus, vandalism, bomb threats, property damage, thefts, anything like that. But more specifically to the problem that's being addressed on a daily basis across this country and across the world actually is bullying. Every one of us now know that kids who are bullied occasionally make some bad decisions and take it into their own hands because they didn't know they had other options, or they didn't know what else to do if they were the victim of bullying. Or if you're a student and you have a friend who's being bullied, you didn't know because you didn't want to become the victim of that bullying. So Speak Out is there for all those reasons. Speak Out has exactly the same phone number as Crimeline. It's 1-800-423-TIPS. The website's a little bit different. It's called speakouthotline.org. And the kids can go there, and it's sort of interactive, and it's built around, there's a younger side for the elementary type aged kids, and then on the other side a little more mature for high school and stuff. It's all the same content. At the end of it, what we do at the website is explain to the students, this is why we're here and this is what we want you to tell us. You know, with the modern kids today, you and I didn't grow up like this, but they can be in the same room and they're texting each other. So we tend to get a lot of text tips and Speak Out. The kids feel comfortable sending us tips like that, and they also send us tips over the website. But our main goal is to help the community keep the campuses specifically safe. We take tips on, our number one tip is on bullying. Our number two tip is on actually some property crimes that are going on in the schools and things of that nature. And then we do take a lot of tips that are reference problems that are happening back at homes. So we're always responding to those. What I will tell you that I think is probably one of the most powerful things that we do at Speak Out is this. We take a lot of tips reference kids who have threatened to hurt themselves. And whether it be from problems at home or it be bullying from kids that they're going to school with. And we have had incidents where a tip would come in from someone saying, I am very worried about my friend. They're making statements that they're going to hurt themselves, da-da-da-da-da. That tip will come in, and we have people on call 24 hours a day for tips that need immediate action. So the tip will come to my on-call person. They are then immediately in contact with local law enforcement saying, we have information about John Doe who is making threats to themselves. Can you please go check their well-being? And Chief, we have had times when literally, and you and I know this, we don't like Baker acting anybody. And you Baker act somebody because they could potentially hurt themselves. True. So when we're Baker acting somebody because of a tip, that means we potentially have in fact saved a life.
We just saved a life, exactly.
Because there's a student there who felt they had no other recourse or didn't know where to go get help. So Speak Out's a kind of a cool program. It's to teach the kids how to take care of themselves and their campuses and make it safer. And I think it's a wonderful program.
And you may have parents out there asking right now, let's say my 15, 16-year-old calls in a tip. Clearly they're anonymous. Right. It works exactly the same way as we explained before. But now you've got a parent wondering, well, all right, I've got a 15, 16-year-old, 17-year-old that now is entitled to a reward. Does it work exactly the same way for them?
Speak Out's actually a little bit different. In this day and age right now, we're asking students to call for the right reason. Call because it matters. Call because you want to make your community safer or your campus safer. There are certain calls that come in maybe about campus that might be criminal in nature, and so we'll visit those on a case-by-case basis with the board of directors to see if that should receive a cash reward. But I will tell you this. If it comes in and it's going to get rewarded with cash, it will be paid exactly the same way that we pay Crimeline, because again, we're going to always be maintaining that anonymity in the same manner as the adult program.
Excellent. And I know that's a big concern for a lot of people out there. We go to a lot of community meetings. You went to a community meeting with me here in Melbourne within the last couple of months, and one of the things we heard was there's a fear of retaliation. People even live in fear inside their own homes in some neighborhoods, and Crimeline is an excellent source for them to report crime, remain anonymous, and receive a reward for that. And now, in the schools, there's a lot of the same crime that goes on that needs to be reported, but kids are afraid. Right. And they're afraid of retaliation. The same things that happen out here on the streets can happen in a school. Hopefully not as often or nearly as severe. And I will say, and we do need to say this, that our schools are safe. We do have a lot of, there are a lot of great schools out there and administrators, but I think the administrators would say too that anything that can keep a school safe and help one child or save one life is absolutely an excellent